Welcome everyone, I'm Kristine Fisher, your host of this edition of Cape Ann ARTWaves, coming to you by way of 1623 Studios located in Gloucester, Massachusetts. My fellow co-producer, Jacqueline Ganem DeFalco, will be your host next time. Together, we want to acknowledge the generosity of our amazing sponsors. They are Prince Insurance Agency, M.K. Fisher Visual Artist, Martha K. Anger of Compass Real Estate Brokerage, Protective Packaging, and Common Crow. We're also very appreciative of our partners, Sea Arts, for their terrific job with the communication and marketing, and 1623 Studios, who broadcast and distribute our show. We also want to acknowledge the generosity of Pat Verga and Steve Lacey, who have generated this beautiful music for us. Our program focuses on learning from uniquely talented creatives. We give artists a platform for sharing their backstory, their insights, and their work. Today, I am thrilled to bring forward the highly accomplished and much beloved mixed media artist and my friend, Susan Guest McPhail, otherwise known as Sue. Sue has encouraged countless artists along their journey as a sought-after teacher and mentor. She's an award-winning artist who has deep ties to Cape Ann, having taken classes at the Rockport Art Association and Museum while growing up in Gloucester. Later studying with Joe Jeswald, the founder of Montserrat College of Art, taking classes at Montserrat, Endicott, the MFA school. Sue is always learning, experimenting, innovating. Her studio is located in Essex, Massachusetts, overlooking the river and marsh. Very picturesque perch she has, and she's joining us from her studio. Sue is a member of the National Association of Women Artists, shows her work at the Rockport Art Association and Museum, where she is an artist member and member of the Experimental Group. She is also a member of the Rocky Neck Art Colony, where she has taken part in a winter member show titled Rocky Neck Now 2022 Part 1. And Part 1 is actually over. We're now on to Part 2, so don't miss it. Additionally, Sue is a member of the North Shore Art Association and was part of a 6-week exhibition last September titled 2020 at the Rocky Neck Cultural Center, along with 5 other artists, to include Donna Castleton, Rick Krangle, Kat Masella, Terry Del Percio Piemonte, and me. I had the pleasure to curate the show, and we're showing a wonderful image of one of Sue's pieces titled Searching right now. Her former associations include Boston Artists Association, the Copley Society of Boston, the Pastel Society of America, the Kathleen Lorillard Wolfe Art Club, the Cambridge Art Association, the Pastel Painters of Cape Cod, the Monotype Guild of New England, above and beyond all of these distinguishing creds. What I adore about Sue is that she places a total premium on always having fun. In her words, if you breathe, you must make art. Welcome, Sue Guest McPhail.
Thank you, my bud. That was a lovely introduction.
Well, it's so wonderful to have you on the show. I've been wanting to get you on the show for a long time.
Oh, thank you.
So let's get started. You have such a deep and rich history that I think most of us just don't know too much about. So let's start. Why don't you unpack a little bit about your background?
Okay. Well, I always painted. And it was my happy place and privilege to make art. My mother took me for art lessons at the Rockport Art when I was about 8 or 9. And I loved that. And it was in oil paints. And of course, that was about the only medium that was recognized in those days. And I was down on the wharf with all of the locals, like Emile Groupie, painting boats and the landscape and loving it. But then my journey just kept going, and I found pastel, and I loved that because the colors were so luscious when you laid them down, and I found wonderful papers, and I always loved paper. So that kept me going. And then I did more oils, and the pastels were a little difficult for me. I got an allergy to them, so I just shifted gears, more
And
oils.
moved on to
more-
oil. So Sue, I think this is a brilliant time while you're chatting here about your journey. Let's just interject Pastel Fish. This is
Great.
fabulous. And we're also going to show Anne swimming, and then we're going to move on to oils. But I think
Okay.
these pastels, in your words, are luscious. Anything that you want to say about Pastel Fish?
Oh, well, actually, I did a huge series of fish, a huge series of bathing beauties, you know, the kind that lay on the beach, and your mother would say to you, you shouldn't sit like that. But when you're at the beach, anything goes. So they were wonderful characters to paint.
Mm-hmm. And to that point, you have a wonderful piece, Golden Girls. Does that kind of fall into this discussion? I love this perspective. This is a fantastic perspective, oil on canvas.
Well, that was a fascinating piece, actually. And it took me a long time leaving it, coming back to it. And finally, I just looked at it one day and I knew what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And they were three women from Rockport who were all friends who used to go to the beach every day. And one of them even made a studio visit. It was lovely to meet her, and she loved the painting, and it was all very sweet. And I had it on display at the Greenbelt because I was a volunteer there on their original member group, and that founded it. And I volunteered for 20 years. Hung the show.
Geez, that's impressive. Well, let's keep going on about your story. I know we have two more images that we want to show as we talk about your journey, but you mentioned to me when we were preparing for our conversation today that your favorite era was the 1990s. Just give us a few snippets, because you were down in New York all the time and at the mansions, Margaret and John. So take us away.
Imagine they had a lovely apartment at the National Arts Club, and it was a gorgeous setting to be in a show there. I felt so honored, and I did win a prize at one of them, and was shocked. That was the Catherine Lorillard Wolfe exhibit, of which I was a member. But it was a time that was just to fly down and have your paintings there. And I had friends that were there too, one of which had a daughter who was a federal marshal who came to the show in the subway and was not fearful at all.
How about that?
A lot of good times.
A lot of good times. I would say heady times. And I remember you sharing with me that you showed your work at the Federal Reserve, right?
Yes, that was the bathing suit on Arts Around Boston magazine. The idea came from a challenge at the Monotype Guild of New England, which is an absolutely fabulous group who have wonderful shows in wonderful places. And they had a challenge called Expanded Boundaries. And I had no idea what I was going to do. And then it came to me, and I gathered up all this junk from the yard and created a bathing suit. It was the middle of the winter, of course. So that was kind of a fun thing. And I built it out of monotypes that were done on a gelatin press and a traditional press. That went to the Federal Reserve. It went to Bradford College. It got on the cover of this magazine, wonderful magazine. And it was a special time. It was such a surprise to me, but a wonderful one. I was very grateful for it.
Well, that's a distinguishing honor to have that piece, which is a non-traditional piece.
It's true.
Very experimental, and here it is on the cover of Arts Around Boston. I just love it. I want to also mention that you founded the Confetti Group. You were a member of the Confetti Group.
Oh, yes. There were 5 of us, and all ages, and we got together on Mondays and we experimented and we did some absolutely crazy things. We put paintbrushes on the end of sticks and drew on paper on the ground, and we went away on vacation together and drew and painted, and it was quite wonderful, really.
Oh, that sounds so rich and so fun. So fun. There's another piece that we want to talk about before we move on. This is such a nice evolution of your work, and I think folks will really appreciate this. I want to show your Gloucester kind of cityscape, if you will, oil on canvas, because this gives a really great sense of your representational work, right?
Yes, yeah, that was a time when I was doing a lot of oils and acrylics, and I did a huge Gloucester series, and that one is living in Connecticut now. But I had a one-man show at Rockport Art, and that was my centerpiece. And then I had pastels and loads of beach scenes, which flew out the door, fortunately.
Fantastic. Lucky. Let's move on and talk about your stunning location where you get so much of your inspiration. You have these beautiful views from your perch of the coastline and the marshes.
Oh,
And you said to me as we prepared, I love this quote. You said, "Let your work speak to you." And it's all of that wonderful internalizing, externalizing from where you are. So
it's true. It's part of intuitive painting. After I got into printmaking, it gave me a vehicle to jump on the bandwagon and expand that ideas with paint and paper. And I started doing collage and absolutely loved it.
mhm.
And I thought my previous paintings were too tight. I kept thinking, oh my goodness, I'm tight as a tick, but that's not a good thing. So I started just letting go, and I came up with all of these techniques. And then later I thought, I may as well teach these. I want to pass it on to whoever would like to try it, and not how to paint. That's an individual thing. But these are like little gifts. Try this, try that, and it can make such a change in a person's life, their art life.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We have two pieces here that I want to be sure we fold into our conversation. The first, which is your first collage piece that we're showing, nesting.
Oh, nesting. That's owned by Pam Stratton
Ooh.
and Catherine Tuck. And that was a wonderful piece, I thought. I really loved it too. It had a combination of all of the papers that I had continued to teach. It had gelatin prints paper. It had all kinds of crazy techniques, and it just flowed. And it was really fun. I mean, it's the combination of things that's so exciting.
Right. And I'm drawn to also the architecture of it. You have a certain amount of structure. And then you have this lovely little bird that is nested in that you don't see initially.
No, I didn't want
a real surprise.
I wanted it to be a surprise. And it just spoke to me, and I just kept going with it. And that's how I am painting now, totally intuitively. I don't start any one way.
Right. Right. Well, let's talk about another piece before we move on, because the next topic is your beautiful studio there. I'm sure everybody would love to learn more about your studio. But Metamorphosis, this is a piece that was in our 2020 Vision Show.
Yes.
And it got a lot of attention.
I really love that piece too, actually. For me, it's got a softness to it. It's on paper again, and frequently I take my paper and bond it to boards or canvas. But that one has softened edges. It's got a little pastel in it. It's got a little paint, and it just always felt right from the beginning. And not every painting does. I have an awful lot of doggies here, and they will be painted over, and they will become cheerful at some point. But
well, I love that. That's good for us fellow artists to hear, right? That
true.
It can just take a little time, a little perspective, and a little attention to create a bow wow, as you would call it, into a stunning piece. Let's talk about your studio practice. You are always mixing it up. You are the queen of mixing it up. You never start the same way twice. Talk to us about what you do.
No, I just come in and I just either start with a blank canvas or an old one and a roller and some gesso, or a credit card, which is something I taught in my classes to use, because it kept you away from a 2-hair brush, so you wouldn't get too tight like myself in previous years. And I had read that Hawthorne taught in his classes down in Provincetown with a palette knife, and he called them mud heads. He wouldn't allow anyone to use a brush until they had gotten light, dark shape. And with a credit card, that's what you're going to get. It's a great tool, actually. And you can cut them up into all shapes. I think people thought I was crazy, but really it's a very sensible thing.
I love your explanation. And I'd like you to talk just for, a second more about shapes, because shapes are, you've talked about value, but shapes are really critical. Do you start with shapes right away?
No, I don't. I just start with a piece of paper or whatever is handy. I did do a painting a day for about, almost a whole year. And what I would do is put a piece of, it's a strange paper, heavy duty paper. I started out with 6x8s and ended up with 12x12s. But I just had it laying there every day. And then I'd come in and just start throwing paper around. I would scrape paint on it. I'd just use whatever was handy and just love the whole thing. So I came up with some of my best works. It's daily practice that really gets you going. I come up some days to this wonderful space and I just squirt out paint, or I fill squirt bottles with my paint, and like this, and just go from there. I don't necessarily set out even a palette because I don't really need to. I just go with my gut feeling and let it happen. And it doesn't matter what comes out.
Oh, you do it so well, Sue, honestly. And you make it look so easy. And your work is just so rich and is dreamy. Let's talk, we're talking about your process. I want to talk about it a little bit more, because you keep also a journal. And your journal would be a marvelous tip for.
Now this is the fun thing. I was never a person to sketch in my journal or do wonderful things, which so many of my friends do. But if I was sitting watching television with my family, my little family, I got these books and sketchbooks like this, and I used a glue stick and some markers, Posca markers, and I would just not think about it. I watch a little of the movie and I get my scissors out, cut things up. It is the most freeing things. You can do it any time at all. It really is.
Yeah, I love that. I think that is such a marvelous tip. And I've seen your journal, and I know that it's just rich with great ideas and color.
Yours is too.
No, not nearly to the extent. I want to also focus on two pieces. I don't want these to get away from us. Crane's Beach.
That came back. You can't escape your surroundings or yourself. And I thought, gee, I haven't done one in so long. And I just started with two colors, yellow and blue, put down sand and paint,
Wow.
paper.
That's a wonderful nod to Crane's Beach, especially with the sand. The next piece I want to talk about is this marvelous piece that got a lot of attention also at our show, 2020 Vision, A Wing and a Prayer. What a sweet, joyful piece this is.
It really is. It just happened too. It was an old painting. It had paper all over it. And then I started painting it. And then I started with bands. And then I took hand sanitizer and wiped out some of the acrylic paint and found spots. And so it just sort of lifted up and down. Then I found the bird. And then I looked at this thing that looked like a flower pot. And it looked like somebody praying. And I thought, oh my word, it's a wing and a prayer.
I love it. It is such a charming piece. And birds figure into your work a little bit, don't they?
They do. I'm a gardener and love the birds. They just float in and out of my life. And I find feathers and use them in printmaking. And there they are. They're always popping up, popping their little heads.
I love them. They're so delicate and they're so joyful. Let's talk about artists who have influenced you, because you had the most remarkable early days of being exposed to so many iconic.
I really have been. And I painted, I was part of the Rockport scene for years in the sketch groups. And a lot of my friends were there. Charles Movali was there every day painting away with his mirror, which is a marvelous thing to look at your work in reverse. Dale Radcliffe was there. Let's see, Eva Sincata, so many wonderful artists, Ron Straka. And, we had a great time doing the figure portraits. I had started a clothes portrait group actually here in Essex at the Hanlon Gallery that was down the street, and then moved on to Rockport because we needed a bigger space. A lot of journeys there. I have met a lot of wonderful artists, actually. I've been blessed that way.
Oh, you have. And not only have you met them, you've been right in the thick.
I really have, I have to say.
Yeah, you grew up such that, they had tremendous influence on you, and I'm sure you on them as well. There's a piece that I want to be sure that we show by Jankowski, one of your favorite artists.
Yes.
Talk to us about this beautiful piece. It's so fluid and free and light.
Isn't it? I know. And I remember the day he painted it, he got out his white crayon and he started marking on this watercolor board. And then he threw the watercolor on and he ended up with this gorgeous piece. And I found it in his studio one day and he allowed me to buy it. And I was very happy. And I look at it every day. I was part of his class on Rocky Neck over by the North Shore, actually. And Ron Straka was in that class, quite a few friends. And his class was marvelous. It wasn't a how to paint. It was a mentoring class. He gave us exercises to do, made strong directions for each person. He was really something, and he worked hard at his craft. He would constantly be painting an old Japanese scroll. He would be doing copying those to get into the flow of the scenery and the flatness. And he was marvelous. And he did his best paintings, in my opinion, in his later years, which gave me a lot of hope and still does.
Well, you are so lucky. He is just so iconic, right? I mean, he really is such a celebrated. Well, Sue, I want to say what a pleasure to talk to you. You are just such a treasure. Thank you
Oh,
for joining me on this
so
show.
much. Oh, I just love being part of this wonderful community that you've created. Thank you so
Well,
much for
you're
having.
so very welcome. You are so adventurous, and we all have a lot to learn from you and your spirit. I want to also thank our sponsors once again, and I want to thank Anders Johnson, our videographer, who does such a tremendous job with our conversations, our Cape Ann ARTWave videos. I want to encourage everybody to check out 1623 Studios website for their social media schedule, as well as their TV network schedule for access to this recording. We've been talking to Sue Guest McPhail. What a pleasure, what an honor. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you so much, Kristine. Pleasure.